It is currently middle of autumn here in Australia, and that means one thing for my small nursery. It's time to plant the last cuttings and end all propagation for the next 4 months. The good news is I'll have more time to create YouTube videos, but I also have to make sure there's enough plants to see the nursery through the winter months. The reason I won't be propagating most plants until spring returns is that the great majority would simply not grow. This applies to cuttings, leaf and seed propagation. But winter and cold are not the only reason succulent cuttings won't grow. In this video, we'll try to identify all the main causes cuttings may fail to root and grow. If you're trying to propagate cuttings during a plant's dormant season, chances are they will simply not root and can even die. In my experience, the majority of succulents will have hard time growing and rooting as cuttings during the dark, cold months. When the days get shorter and it starts getting cold outside, the plant's internal clock will know winter is on the way and they'll start shutting down. To be honest, I would not recommend trying to grow any cuttings from late autumn to the end of winter, especially if you live in a climate with frosty and snowy winters. In my part of the world, winters are pretty mild. We rarely get frost, and if there is one, it usually disappears pretty quick. But even despite this, most succulents will still not grow if I was to plant cuttings in winter, and believe me, I have tried. The only plants that will successfully propagate in winter for me are called hardy sedum and aeonium. But even with these succulents, I tend to wait until the last month of winter. I have seen charts of dormancy for succulents and was incredibly surprised when pretty much most of them would list plants like Echeveria, Haworthia or Chrysula as winter growers, because this is not my experience at all. I can quite confidently say that none of my Echeveria, Haworthia or Chrysula and the majority of other succulents mentioned in the charts grow during winter and are certainly very unlikely to root as cuttings. If someone can explain these charts, please do so in the comments, as I can't for the life of me understand why my experience of over a decade contradicts them so much. My advice to anyone wanting to propagate cuttings is to do it in spring when danger of frost has passed. All succulent cuttings will root well. Summer and early autumn can be great too, but do watch out for heat waves, as many cuttings can burn in strong sun. If you're watching this after you've planted cuttings and it's winter, the best you can do is provide warmth and light. It is possible to trick plants into thinking it's time to grow by getting plant growing lights and placing them in the warmest area of your house. Personally, I don't like doing this on purpose, as in my opinion, plants should get their dormancy rest. However, it is an option. Poor light is a cause of many problems when it comes to growing succulents. If you're trying to root cuttings in too much shade, many, especially the sun lovers, can fail. Having said that, you do need to be careful during summer, as too much hot sun can kill a cutting. Pretty much all of my cuttings are grown in full sun position under a 30% shade cloth, which bounces off harmful UV rays, but still gets plenty of good light in for the cuttings to photosynthesize properly and stay compact. If you don't have a shade cloth, morning sun followed by bright afternoon shade should do the trick. This will contradict a lot of the advice about raising cuttings, but I believe they should be watered well. All of the nursery cuttings get watered when the potting mix dries out, otherwise they can lose too much water and die. Many people would say that this will rot the cuttings, but if they are planted in good potting mix and in pots with drainage, this is unlikely to happen. In my experience, regular watering is going to stimulate root growth and help the cuttings establish. If there is no water, this can signal to the plant that drought is happening, and it should therefore not waste energy on growth. A good portion of succulents are incredibly hardy and will grow roots even when they are not watered at all, but I have seen lack of water cause problems in root growth many a time. While many succulents will root in just about anything, sometimes a good potting mix makes all the difference for cuttings. In the early days of running my nursery, I used to grow ferns and foliage plants for the florist industry. When I decided to switch to succulents, I had lots of potting mix especially made for ferns left over and thought I'd try and use it to propagate cuttings. Turns out that wasn't actually a great idea, as many of the succulent cuttings didn't make it. The tough ones did, but a few hybrids ended up just dying. Ever since I started using premium succulent potting mix, I've encountered very few problems, and pretty much all of the succulent varieties I've ever grown will happily root in it. The quality of the potting mix can sometimes determine if the cutting grows or fails. I always found that the sandy, heavy mixes would get mixed results. Similarly, mix that drain way too fast can cause for the cutting to not be able to get enough water and cause it to dry out too much. You need something in the middle. It should have lots of bits to dry out fairly well, but also be able to hold the moisture for long enough so the plant can have a drink. If you can't find a good succulent potting mix, seed raising mix with a bit of perlite or pumice should do the trick. Unfortunately, rot and fungal diseases are pretty common in some succulents. They can enter through the wound of a cutting if it has not been dried for at least 24 hours. Potting mix can have fungus, or spores can just be floating around if the weather has been humid. Some succulents are more prone to disease than others. I find that a few types of hybrid Echeveria almost always get attacked by fungus unless they live in a greenhouse that can eliminate humidity. So if you're propagating any of these types of succulents and it's been a bit rainy and humid, there is a chance they may be suffering from a fungal disease, especially if the stalk is getting moldy or mushy and leaves have dark spots. I'm going to contradict myself a bit, as I said earlier, to water your cuttings, but if the stalk in the ground is getting mushy or dark color, keep the cutting on the dry side and do not leave it in the rain, especially when it's humid. Some succulents are super prone to fungal disease, and if you're propagating one from cuttings, it is best to keep it under cover. Some succulents root fast, others can take ages. If you have one of the others, you may be waiting for over a month for roots to appear. To find out whether the succulent you're trying to propagate is slow growing, you can look up its name to see if anyone mentions the speed of growth. Typically, the slower growing varieties also take longer to send roots as cuttings. And that's it for today. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or something to add, you can leave a comment below. To learn more about succulents, you can subscribe to our channel or go to our website succulentgrowingtips.com. Thank you very much for watching.